Howdy, howdy, howdy. It's your favorite two belligerent guys, fat and angry over here. He's fat and I'm angry.
I am indeed fat.
It is the 5th of May, 2018, and today we're going to talk about...
Horror movie franchises. Basically, do they have a future for sequels? Do they have potential for reboots? Or should they stay dead? I've got a list here of, I think, 10 or 11 big franchises, and we're just going to go over what we think about their potential.
All right. I'll go ahead and let you lead on this one. What's the first one you want to talk about?
Alright, first one is Friday the 13th. Now, while most of the Friday the 13th films do have a basic formula to it, teenagers show up, Jason kills them, this is one I think can basically go on forever. It kind of set the standard for the Slaughterhouse franchise, and I think as long as you don't try to muck up the lore too much, you can keep going. There was one idea I heard of that they were going to consider for a sequel, and I think it would be great, is do like a Survivor sequel, where all the survivors from the previous movies show up to Camp Crystal Lake to face Jason for the final time, and see how many of them fail. What do you think?
I think that'd be interesting to see. I mean, definitely that would get a lot of heads turning in like the horror movie community. You know, people would eat that shit up immediately. You want to talk about bringing the Friday the 13th franchise back into the forefront. That would do it.
Yeah, that would definitely shake some trees there. Plus, I think Jason would still do great in like crossover series. I've mentioned it before. I would love to see him fight Pumpkinhead, and it'd be real easy to get the two of them brawling. As silly as it sounds, I'd also like to see a Jason versus Jaws, just for funsies, but I don't think that would be a very serious title.
I don't think you could get Jaws, but I'm pretty sure you could get a Jason versus Sharknado.
That would be awesome.
It's like Jaws, except a lot more than just one.
Yeah. And horrible CG. Horrible, horrible CG.
Styrofoam puppets.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that, God, when was the first one made?
What, Sharknado?
No, not that.
Oh, Jason.
Yeah.
I believe it was 80. I could be wrong. 80, 81, something like that.
Yeah, early 80s. I mean, like when it's one of the archetypal slasher movies. When you think of slashing, you think of like Jason Voorhees with the machete, literally slashing people up,
Yeah.
carving them up like fucking pumpkins in Halloween.
Yeah.
They've rebooted it once already.
I actually really liked that reboot.
How many sequels have they done to the reboot, or is it just the reboot so far?
Just the reboot so far. I know there was talk of doing like a sequel that was found footage, and that quickly got canned. There's also talk about doing a sequel that somehow involves his father. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't really see how it can expand upon the lore. Now, there's a fan theory based on Jason Goes to Hell that I think they could explore. In one of the scenes, you actually see the Necronomicon prop from the Evil Dead series, and the fan theory goes that when Jason drowned, the mother tried to use the Necronomicon to raise him. And that actually makes quite a few things in the movie work really well.
Like how?
Well, her going insane, for one, because she was messing with the demonic magic. The fact that he never dies gives it an explanation. And why in Jason Goes to Hell they had to use the weird ritual knife to put an end to him for good.
Well, technically for good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one still has legs. Unfortunately, it's just like right now, I think it's at a point where if they do another sequel, it's probably going to be like a straight to DVD, like Netflix original Jason 2 or Friday the 13th 2. This is like, it's kind of like people don't really consider it like, when people talk about those movies, only the hardcore fans call like the Friday the 13th movies. Most people just call it the Jason movies.
Yeah.
It's like, like some people, it's like Halloween is easier to remember and it rolls off the tongue better. But I know some people just call them the Michael Myers movies as well.
Yeah.
But we'll probably get to that eventually. All right, what's next on the list?
Nightmare on Elm Street. This one in particular, there's one spot in the sequels that I really think has the potential for a good movie. Between Nightmare on Elm Street 5 and Freddy's Dead Final Nightmare, you don't actually get to see what happens between those movies. Most of the movies, they tie in pretty close to each other, but in Freddy's Dead, he's essentially wiped out every child but one in this entire state area. And you don't get to find out what happened between part 5 and that happening. And I think there's a really good potential for a movie there.
Well, it'd be like, it would essentially just be like, murder fest, high body count, all that stuff.
Yeah, a way I envision it actually is like maybe Freddy gets a hold of a sleepwalker and thus is able to interact more with the real world rather than just having to dip into dreams and scare a kid to death.
Well, he doesn't really scare them to death. He physically murders the shit out of them. And like whatever injuries they sustain while sleeping, like manifest on them in the real world.
Well, yeah.
If he just scared them to death, that would kind of get silly after a while.
Yeah.
He carves you up, you end up carved up in the real world. I remember when what was that one where the guy liked video games and so
Oh yeah, yeah, he ends up killing the kid with the power glove. But
and when he's like jumping on the kid, you literally see like the kid's like stomach deforming in and like he's flopping around as like he's getting Goomba stomped to death.
Yeah.
Shitty way to go. But what about in terms of, because they already rebooted it.
Yeah, and while I do like the reboot, I don't think that's the route they need to go. I think it was a nice take on it, but really, it's hard to imagine that role carrying on without Robert Englund. He's put so much heart and soul into that character.
Well, if they're going to do another one, they need to do it quickly because he's getting up in years, and we've already been losing some of our favorite actors lately.
Yeah, I hear they are rebooting Nightmare on Elm Street again, and from what I know, they don't plan on getting Robert Englund for it. And I'll watch it, and I'll probably enjoy it to some degree. But I kind of wish they weren't hitting the reset button. I'd like to see them do.
Well, it's hitting the reset button too many times. The Spider-Man franchise has been doing that lately. Because what was the first one? 2001? Then they ran through Spider-Man 3, hit the reset button. That lasted 2 movies, and then they hit the reset button again.
Yeah. At least we didn't have to watch them get bit by that damn spider again. We already know.
So yeah, it's like, that is nice. It's like, we've seen the origin story. Twice now? Twice now. Let's move on. You know how it fucking starts. But yeah, in terms for me, yeah, Robert Englund really did become that character. He's not, like, Freddy Krueger is not like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees. He's not just a dude with a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, like, technically you could even do that with the Texas Chainsaw Massacres with Leatherface.
Yeah, Leatherface has been through several incarnations, so.
Well, I mean, like, in terms of, like, the actor who plays it, Robert Englund is synonymous with fucking Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
Like, you really can't. It's like, now, the guy that got, I forget his name, but he was the same dude who played Rorschach in The Watchmen, and he did an awesome job because,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen The Watchmen comics, anyone listening, but look at The Watchmen comics, look at one of the panels where it shows Rorschach without his mask, and compare that to the movie, and Homeboy looks like he was ripped straight from that fucking comic.
Yeah.
And made into a real person. He wasn't born, he didn't grow up as a child, he just was...
Manifested.
He just crawled out of Alan Moore's fucking brain.
Yeah. And like I said, I think he did a good job with...
Oh, he did a really good job. I mean, like, if you want to play up the whole reason that, like, Freddy Krueger is pissed off because he wants revenge, he did a very good job with that. Like, especially that one scene in the new one where it's like, the kid's, like, begging for his life. He says, like, I'll do whatever I can. It's like, can you turn back time? Can you bring the dead back to life?
Yeah.
Because, like, like, really, I don't want to be dead and I don't want to have been burned to death. Can you do something about that? No? Well, then it's your ass.
Yeah, he had some pretty chilling lines too. One of my favorite is after he kills this kid, it goes back to the dream, and he's like, "Did you know the brain can survive 10 minutes after death? We still got 9 minutes to play." It's just like, fuck.
It's like, he's going to work on you. He's going to work on you like a final exam. Like a take-home project.
He is going to gnaw you like an old bone.
So yeah, he did a good job with that. I mean, like, he's a good actor. I'll give him that. If only I could remember his fucking name. Unfortunately, he's not as synonymous as Robert Englund,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some actors that I really like. I like their work, and for the life of me, I cannot remember their names. It takes me a long, long time to remember people's names and actors' names.
Yeah. I have that problem too. I usually remember them by their characters and not who they are.
Well, it was like that when we were talking about like the It movie in a previous episode. Like I kept referring to some of the characters as like like the black kid and the Jew and the loudmouth. It's like, what were their names? Fuck it, I don't know. And it's like the only reason I remember that the loudmouth kid's name was Richie Tozier is because I keep thinking back to that one scene from the miniseries where he's getting yelled at by Pennywise, played by Tim Curry.
Yeah,
And he keeps calling us like, beep, beep, Richie! Get out of town, Tozier!
Yeah.
Like, that's just such an amazing scene. It's like stuff like that, it makes the characters' names easy to remember because they're yelled at you multiple times in a scene.
Yeah.
Like the kid who's the asthmatic. I don't remember what the kid's name is, but I remember his nickname, Wheezy.
Yeah.
That's what Pennywise calls him.
Or the fat kid, they called him Haystacks.
Well, he was named after.
I think his name was Ben, but I could be wrong.
Ben Hanscom, I believe it was. But then again, he's almost the main character next to Bill Denbrough.
Yeah.
Who technically is the main character, but Bill Denbrough and Ben Hanscom are like the two main characters of that book.
Yeah.
But in fact, one could argue which one is the main character of the book. Because you know that Ben Hanscom is supposed to be a step-in for Stephen King himself, on the count of like he's the fucking horror writer. Stephen King almost always has to fucking put a horror writer in each of his stories, somewhere. At least in the earlier ones.
Yep.
It was in Langoliers. It was in The Shining. It was in It.
It's kind of in Stand By Me, the main character.
Tommyknockers as well.
Yeah.
What about The Stand? Was there a horror writer or a writer at all in that one?
I don't remember one in there, but the miniseries was greatly shortened compared to the book.
Yeah, I need to pick up the book at some point. I need to pick up a lot more of his books. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
But then again, if you're listening, one of the reasons you listen is for the try to follow us along our trails and then try to follow the breadcrumbs back.
The blender of topics.
We don't pigeonhole you with our show. You get a lot for what you. Is anyone paying for this? I don't fucking know.
Probably not.
Anyway, moving on. That's the next one on the list.
Halloween. Now this series, from what I understand, they're working on a sequel right now, and for a long time it's been rumored that they're going to have the main hero from the first film, Laurie Strode, actually end up taking the role of Michael Myers.
Well, that actress is still alive. There's no reason she can't.
Yeah, and from what I understand, she is signed on to the new project. This is about the last thing I think they can really do with the franchise, though. Michael Myers, I don't find him an interesting villain. The first couple movies, it's interesting to watch him just being the stone cold killer. But then it got a new director after the third sequel, and they took it as a supernatural approach. And when John Carpenter directs, he doesn't acknowledge the Thorn trilogy. And then you had Rob Zombie's reboot, which I didn't really care for it. He's basically just, an abused redneck.
But I found the movie a lot easier to watch. We talked about the first Halloween movie, I think, and one of the other ones. If we didn't, just a quick recap on that. I can't stay awake in the first movie.
Nowadays it's really slow. I don't feel it's aged well.
It's like I will watch a slow movie. I will watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. I will watch Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I will watch a lot of fucking slow, take forever to get to the point movies. But I cannot stand those fucking teenage girls. Oh, Tommy's so clear. You gonna go to the fall dance? Shut the fuck up, for God's sakes. Jesus fucking Christ. It's like you said, why is the food still talking? Why the fuck is it still talking?
Exactly.
It's like, when you get to the point where like Laurie Strode is getting ready to babysit, you are begging. You are trying to you are drawing a pentagram in your fucking room so you can summon Michael Myers into the movie just to show up earlier than he's supposed to kill the shit out of these yammering airhead teenagers. I get so sick of them. My God.
Yeah.
That is not a slow movie. That is a painful movie. That is a movie that you have to chew through like a diabetic through like a 3-foot-long Snickers bar.
Yeah. I really think that's a franchise that you can go ahead and lay to rest. I know some people think blasphemy, but I just don't think there's anything else you can do with Myers.
It's like out of all the slasher guys I can think of, like from the main like things, like
Right.
when you think of like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, what's some other ones?
Yeah, it's like Jason may be routine, but it's fun to watch him work.
Well, and also like he's gone out of his comfort zone. He has gone out of Crystal Lake, though that tends to be like his main stomping ground.
Yeah.
And like he comes up with like such fun, interesting ways to murder the shit out of people. It's like he could just like machete you to death, or he could beat you to death with another camper in a sleeping bag. That's
Yeah, there's this one great kill in the reboot where he ties a girl up in a sleeping bag and hangs her over a fire. And so she's trapped in the sleeping bag being burnt to death.
Yeah, that is.
While
like
he machetes her boyfriend.
It's like being slow roasted over an open fire is not a pleasant or quick way to go.
Yeah.
It's like he would have done her a mercy if he had shoved a fucking kebab spear through her, man. She would have died faster that way.
Yeah.
But like God, what was I know like beating the one sleeping bag like camper against another sleeping bag camper was something they did as a joke in Jason X.
Yeah, but it was also a take on one of his kills where he just picked up a girl in a sleeping bag and broke her across a tree.
Yeah, he's just like beating her across that tree like he's trying to like loosen up the salt or like a salt in a salt packet or the sugar in a sugar packet. I need to loosen up some of this fucking sweet and low here. Just give me a second. Just whap, whap, whap. There, now I can pour this shit into my coffee. Maybe if Jason Voorhees drinks coffee, I think that like the ground up bodies of his victims are what he would use as a sweetener.
Probably.
It just seems like that's. But like that aside, like there's like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface. Those are like like big standout slasher villains. Michael Myers to me was never a big standout slasher villain.
Yeah.
I know that's like that's fucking heretical thought with a lot of like horror movie aficionados that like fucking swear by the Halloween series. But to me, no.
Yeah, as much as I consider him one of the big four, I consider him the bottom of the big four. He's always felt more like a B-list character to me. And
because in essence, what is he? He's a giant involuntary muscle that wears like a blue overalls and a sanded down white painted fucking William Shatner mask.
yeah, once you know it's William Shatner, you can't unsee it.
I like that when they did the movie, they desperately tried to like sandpaper off the details of the mask without completely damaging it because they desperately wanted it to look like not William Shatner, so they didn't get the shit suit out of them. Because I'm pretty sure William Shatner, like, famed for playing Captain Kirk, would not be happy if he truly appreciated the fact that his face has haunted the nightmares of many a person for like the past how many years?
Oh, at least 30, probably more.
Like I'm pretty sure, like he's gone to like one or two like sci-fi conventions, and then just like people just ran out screaming. Why does that always happen? But anyways, like yeah, Halloween. I think. I mean, they already rebooted it. I did like the Rob Zombie, the first
The
reboot.
pacing of it is definitely a lot better than the original, but I think they took all the mystique out of Myers, and that's what ruins it for me. They tried to recapture it in 2, but it was just like a weird fever dream.
Well, you see him eat that fucking like what gun? I remember that being a big gun. That may just be my imagination. It may just be like a fucking 32. But I remember her like shooting him like point blank in the face with like a big fucking heavy caliber revolver.
Yeah.
But it did have a scene where like one of our mutual friends said it was one of the most realistic depictions of a neck getting broken in a movie. Because when you think of like neck getting broken, you always think of like grabbing the head and just turning it or twisting
the
it.
Steven Seagal twist.
Then did the Steven Seagal on him. But no, it's like a bit where like he breaks into a house and he knocks down this woman, and then while her head's on, I think it's like up on an incline or something, or like on just it's her head's a bit higher than the rest of her, and then he just like stomps down on the base of her skull and just crunches her fucking spine. And it looked painful to watch because you hear that crunch and you see that foot drop, and that's a big boot.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, it was a bit too real. But that's what you need in like a good horror movie.
Yeah.
It can't just be like, fanciful, like running them through with a spear and then lifting them up like, 5 feet while they're like going, and flailing with blood coming out of their mouth.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you need something that looks like it could physically happen. But like, like the grittiness and stuff like that, I did kind of like that. And like, yes, there was some like teenager talking, but they interspersed that with like more background to Myers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did like that, but yeah, I think even the reboot's done its course.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that the Halloween series can go. Or if you're gonna bring it back, go back to the anthologies. Bring back stuff like Season of the Witch. I know a lot of people are gonna hate me for saying that. I like Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch was good.
I know it was hokey. You can't say it's more hokey than some of the other bullshit they did with Myers later.
Yeah, and the Silver Shamrock jingle does get old, but
I find it like delightfully infectious in certain points, but just when they play it like over a long period of time, it kind of gets annoying. But I do like when that creepy announcer voice comes in. It's almost time, kids. Be sure to stay tuned for the special giveaway.
Yeah. One of the taglines on the poster that I always loved, if you've ever seen the poster for the original 2 Halloweens, the first one is called The Night He Came Home. The second one's called More of the Night He Came Home. And for the third one, they put The Night No One Comes Home.
It's like, we're not fucking around anymore. Enough of this bullshit. We're getting right to the point. Everyone dies. The end.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be great if they actually did start doing the anthology, but I think the Halloween name is just too saturated with Myers at this point for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, we both kind of, there's like, one more hurrah if they bring back Laurie Strode, but then like after that, kind of like put the kibosh on it. All right, what's the next one?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Now this one, God, I'm wondering like how many sequels does the reboot even have? Because the reboot has a lot of fucking sequels to it.
It's actually a pretty tough map to follow because there are sequels that only follow certain movies and prequels that only acknowledge certain movies. And it's actually slapped together pretty hard. It's a hell of a roadmap. I don't even know how to organize them on my shelf, to be honest. I'm probably just going to do it by their release dates.
Well, the first one, in my opinion, like, that was just a product of its time. It was dirty. It was gritty. I don't know if you said it, but I heard someone say to the effect of, when you're watching the movie, it's like every single square inch of the set, of the characters, of the props, everything is covered in dirt and grime and grit and rust, and it's just nothing looks like you want to touch it. If you were thrown into this set, you would do your damnedest to just hover an inch off the ground and not physically contact anything.
Yeah. This is also a franchise, as much as I like Leatherface, I don't think you can do much more with it. They've taken the prequels in as many directions as I think they could do efficiently. And the Texas Chainsaw 3D, I think, closed it off in a nice way that a sequel just doesn't feel viable to that one. And all the other sequels, I really wouldn't want to see an extension of them. It's
Well, I know that like in the reboot, they kept bringing in Arlie Ermy as like the sheriff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's passed away not too long ago, which is a goddamn crying shame. We were just talking about how we wanted to see him in more things, and then he has to fucking go up and die on us.
Yeah. Yeah, Texas Chainsaw 3D, he basically ends up becoming the protector of the last member of his family, and he just wants to stay alone in the basement until he's needed. And I really think that's just kind of the place for Leatherface to lie. You know, they could make a sequel and it could be good chainsaw fun, but I just don't think you could add anything to the story at this point that's going to make it better.
I mean, in the original series, was he ever completely killed off?
Well, it would seem like he was in the Texas Chainsaw 2 when he's like impaled on a chainsaw and the building's crumbling around him, but somehow he ends up in Leatherface.
But that was the third movie, but it almost seemed like that one wasn't even related to the first two.
Yeah.
And to my recollection, the second movie was the only one that was a direct sequel to the first.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to understand where like some of the sequels actually
Because like the
place.
fourth one seems like a straight up reboot, the Next Generation, which in turn would like
Yeah, well, the Next Generation actually had some of the characters from Leatherface.
but but like Leatherface itself seemed like a reboot in it because like in that one,
that one it almost seems like it's its own thing.
I'm thinking like if you're gonna do a sequel, don't do a sequel to the reboot, don't do a sequel to part 3 or 4, do a sequel to part 2.
Yeah.
Bring back I think I don't think the original actor is still alive, is he?
I don't think Gunnar Hansen's still around.
But even if he is, you might want to get someone that just can move around better, someone a bit younger. But get someone and bring back the original Leatherface, the original and I got a soft spot for movies that bring you back to like a point like long ago, long forgotten. Like I really like that movie Hook.
Yeah.
Because it feels like you're going back to some place that's like, fucking ages ago. And like, they bring it back, it's got this mysticism. What was another one? Like Tron Legacy. Like, well, they didn't really go back, but it had a little bit of that,
Yeah.
What was another one? Fucking Return to Oz. Jesus Christ, that's one of my favorite movies.
That's one I need to get.
It was fucking different. I had to mail order the one I got before because that shit was hard to find.
I don't know whether to put it on my wife's fantasy shelf or my horror shelf.
Or both. Get 2 copies.
Get 2 copies. There we go.
Tell them we're bringing it back. But like yeah, like movies that make you feel like you've come back to someplace long forgotten. That like and like even to an extent they did that a little bit with like the most recent Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It's like, because like they find the old, like, ruins of the original Jurassic Park. They find like the old van. They find the old like night vision goggles. And
yeah, and even the new park, it was represented the caretaker's dream. You have people of all types and all like financial capabilities going and visiting this park and getting to interact with the dinosaurs.
I don't remember if there actually was, but if there wasn't a giant statue of like the man, there really fucking should have been.
Yeah.
This is our founder. This was his dream. You wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for him. Yeah. You'd be sitting on your ass watching ABC. But yeah, I think if they go back to the original one, like bring it back, like someone fucking about in some place they really fucking shouldn't have, and like they.
Well, basically that whole park collapsed, so they're gonna have like people, excavating the place, trying to figure out what went wrong, and salvage, and they could possibly dig up Leatherface, and
I think that would make him a bit more superhuman than he should be because like the idea that he's been there all this time. I think like make it look like show like.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about like having people show up right after.
Oh yeah, like do that as a cutscene, and then like either he gets out and like murders them all, or they find that it looks like someone crawled out of here, and they find just like a trail of like looks like someone pushed their way out from the rubble and just a lot of blood.
Yeah.
And like and like he somehow makes it back to the family farm, and like maybe some like surveyors or some people looking to appropriate the land, like come out because Texas has a long history with like people trying to like get control over land and steal land and whatnot.
Yeah.
You can make that part of the plot.
Yeah, you could very easily do that with the Sawyer family.
Oh yeah, like bring that in, and then they stumble across like an old decrepit farmhouse with like furniture made out of people, and then guess who's like fucking lurking around?
Yeah.
But the thing is like the only problem I would see with that is that Leatherface was always kind of Leatherface. If you want to talk about Michael Myers being involuntary muscle, Leatherface was a fucking involuntary muscle. He was just like a maniac that was aimed at people by his family.
He was essentially a trained attack dog.
Yeah, it's like by himself, I don't know how much of a threat he would pose because in no movie do you ever see him acting independently. He's always acting in protection of his family, on orders of his family, or like acting for his family, like going out hunting for people for like chili.
Yeah.
But what I'm just wondering, like, what would he do if he was truly alone by himself?
Well, they kind of actually explained that in Texas Chainsaw 3D. He basically doesn't do anything except, get food from the kitchen and go to his basement. And, yeah, he's not going out making people chili and stuff like that.
Well, I don't see him like fucking wandering into a Kroger's to go pick up like a pound of hamburger meat because the refrigerator's running low.
So yeah, this girl, she shows up, finds out that she's the owner of this house and that Leatherface is her guardian, and he just does his routine. He doesn't actually.
Yeah, he's not fairly proactive on his own volition.
Yeah.
He's mostly just like he's aimed at his victims for the most part. Though he does seem to find fun in it, and hell, like you can make an allusion to the third movie where like he associates people with food instead of people.
Yeah.
There's one of my favorite scenes, like one of the only scenes that I actually like from the third film. We were talking about this just a little while ago, but there's a scene where Leatherface has a speaking spell, and apparently there's a mode where it shows you little pixelated pictures, and you have to spell out what it is. And it shows a clown face, and he keeps putting in FOOD, and the thing keeps correcting him. But it shows that he associates people as food, not as people, which is really unsettling when you think about it. Because when he looks at you the same way, like a hunter looks at like a deer, or well, maybe not much because most hunters now don't hunt for meat. Probably more of the way that like a butcher looks at a cow or a pig. Yeah. That's how he looks at like the average. How he looks at the average person.
Oh.
So what's the next one on the list?
Phantasm.
Well, that one's kind of hit a roadblock.
That one, we watched all 5 of them, and
yes, we did.
I think the 5th one ended it on a note that it could be laid to rest. Plus, kind of like a Nightmare, I just can't imagine anyone else playing the tall man other than Angus Scrims, and he's gone.
Yeah, I mean, like, without Angus Scrim, there is no tall man. Without the tall man, there is no Phantasm.
Yeah, they would have to reboot the series, and I just don't think it would hold up by today's standards.
I mean, they couldn't fucking get funding to make the last movie. How long were they working on that thing?
A very long time.
Like fucking watching a glacier haul ass long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in limbo for at least 5 years, probably more.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that movie a lot longer than just 5 years. But yeah, it's like Phantasm. The first one is a cult classic. I really like the second one though. I know a lot of the true fans don't like it because they replaced the main actor. Yeah,
That's the only fault in it, really, though. I think part 2 is probably one of my favorite of the series.
yeah, it's like it's got some awesome weapons. I mentioned the shotgun before, but I had forgotten that there was like the blowtorch, and that's a fucking blowtorch, man.
Yeah.
He fucking like jerry rigs that sucker up all kinds of crazy.
Yeah, plus just a lot of the action in there and the
Dude,
horror scenes.
Dude, when that guy gets hit with that golden ball, like they do a scene where like it looks like they filmed it in reverse, but when they do it like reverse like that, the way he jerks with that ball inside of him is just fucking sickening. It makes your stomach turn, man.
Well, one of the scenes I love is he's got his hand pinned to the wall by one of the silvers. He sees the gold showing up, and he starts carving his hand off with an axe because he doesn't want to deal with that shit.
Who the fuck would? He's like, oh, fuck me.
Yeah, he doesn't even hesitate with carving his hand off.
And then, like, that one guy like tries throwing that one girl in the crematory, and like she manages to get out, and then knocks him into it and throws him in there, and you see like that hand hit the glass.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, it's like half ash, half ooze.
So it's like, no, not ash. It takes a while to like cremate a body, and if it doesn't kill you right away, son of a bitch, you wish it did.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to go. That's not how I want to do it.
But in terms of making a sequel to it, there's no way you can go with it. I mean,
yeah.
And like as much as I'd like to say that I liked the last movie, I fucking did not. That movie was a train wreck. That movie was bad. They made the balls were almost all CG and they looked fucking terrible. The CG in it was bad. I mean, they had done so much with the practical effects with the balls and like all the other movies, and all of those like Sentinels looked so much fucking better.
Yeah. Basically, them sieging the balls, all it allowed was them to do additional maneuvers, which really wasn't necessary. I liked it better when they were just like straight shot. The idea of them like
It's like, fuck that, just do what they used to do. You put the ball in the front of the camera and you just chase after him with the camera.
Yeah.
It worked in Evil Dead, it'll work here.
Yeah, they almost seemed slower because they had the additional maneuverability.
Like the blood effects, like those CG blood effects were garbage, and like the explosions looked horrible, and the gunfire looked like about up to par with like a fucking YouTube video. I've seen like Angry Joe and like the fucking Nostalgia Critic do better gun special effects than they did on there.
Yeah, well, the movie was loaded with problems for the development.
I guess they just did the best of what they had, and they didn't have a lot.
Yeah, but the way they end it, I just really don't think there's much further you can go.
No.
Even if you could find a replacement for Ingo Scrims, which I don't think you can.
I mean, even if you did, it's like they've already killed off the main side character. You know, what's his name?
Reggie.
Yeah, Reggie. They pretty much killed him off in the real world.
Yeah.
And so they almost make it seem like he ends up in like this alternate reality, though they never fully explain it. They kind of leave it ambiguous. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad.
The way I see it, just based on my interpretation, is when it shows them in the alternate world, it's the final bit of his dream, but as he's dying out. To me, the series basically wraps it up as the whole thing was a dream. And that's actually kind of in line with some of the original script. So,
Oh, like the first two movies where they keep saying, "Don't worry, it's just a dream," and then like fucking Angus Grimm shows up and says, "No, it's not," and fucking like pulls you through a window or something like that, and fucking roll credits.
yeah. Um, yeah, from what I read from like developers' notes, is originally the way it was supposed to end. It was a dream, and they kept making sequels to it. um, but yeah, I think Phantasm it's run its course, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wish Angus Grimm was still around and kicking, but I wish a lot of people were still around and kicking.
Yeah,
All right, what's the next one?
Pumpkinhead.
Pumpkinhead.
From what I understand, the Saw director is going to be rebooting the franchise, and I'm all for this, though I'd be fine with the sequel as well. Pumpkinhead, I think this is a series that still has potential. There's plenty of stories you can still do with it. Um, just as long as it's not hokey. I mean, do a labor of love with the script.
Well, because like I never got to see the original Pumpkinhead. All I know about it is from what you've told me and what I've seen like from Cinemassacre reviews and whatnot. Well, like Lance Hendrickson is in it, and he's like he becomes the avatar of like revenge, and he grows to hate it very quickly,
Yeah.
and then he ends up fighting Pumpkinhead, which in turn means he's kind of fighting himself.
Yeah.
Like
Well, his ghost shows up in part 3 and 4 as well. And some of the interactions he has with Haggis are actually really great. Like in part 4, he's telling Haggis to turn this boy away who wants to wake up Pumpkinhead, and she's like, "It ain't my decision." And he tells him to warn him, and he's like, "Oh, like I tried to warn you."
Well, there you go. You ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer. No, the only Pumpkinhead I've actually seen is the second one because they used to show that on the Sci-Fi Channel a lot back in the day.
Yeah, that one I think is actually one of the weaker titles.
Well,
But
that one they say that, and that one they kind of retcon it. They don't make it as if Pumpkinhead was like a spirit of revenge. They make it as if like he's the vengeful spirit of like a hydrocephalic like special needs kid that was like tortured to death and then tortured and then murdered by like a group of frat boys.
well, that kid is actually at one point the witch in there says that it's Pumpkinhead's son. Pumpkinhead ends up taking him on as a vessel when they do the ritual to raise him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's not the quite the same vengeful demon that you see Haggis raise. And the witch in the second one, that's not Haggis. It's actually a different character.
Yeah, it didn't seem like the same character. I almost want to say that I remember like he was supposed to be like that witch's son or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember a whole lot about it. It's been years since I've seen it.
I think it's implied that it's her son, but they never flat out say it.
I just know like they show that scene in the beginning of like the kid being like tortured and like put on a meat hook and then dumped into a well.
Yeah.
And at the end, that's kind of like how they kill off Pumpkinhead as well. Like he's thrown on the hook and then he's shot up a bunch, and then he's dumped in the well. It's like, well, looks like revenge or not, he's not getting it.
Well, that one cop basically convinces him that his job's done, and so at that point he essentially becomes vulnerable because he's just there to do his job.
Well, in terms of that one, since I'm not entirely well educated with the series, I'd say like I can't really put my say into the matter. But if you think that it deserves a reboot, hell, they could probably like do up the story a bit better. Because like I don't remember the first Pumpkinhead being like considered like one of the great like horror movies either.
Pumpkinhead is more of a cult following than somebody like Jason or Freddy, but I do think he's got potential. I don't think he'll ever have 10 sequels like Jason or Freddy, but who knows? Maybe this new director will take it in a direction that can grow.
All right, what's the next one?
Hellraiser.
Well, this one's seen a lot of sequels.
Yeah, this one it's up to 10 right now.
Fuck, that's a lot more than I thought there was.
Yep. And Hellraiser Judgment definitely opened up some new ideas that are sequel potential, and I would like to see them. Now, I can say I am biased in this opinion because Hellraiser is my favorite series, and I love even the poopy ones. I don't know how many you've seen.
I've seen the first one. I've seen the second. I vaguely remember the third. I did see it, but it's been a while, and I mostly remember stuff like the disco Cenobite that had like the CDs in his head.
Yeah.
And like the bit where Pinhead like fucks with that one priest before he kills him.
Yeah.
And I did see on HBO when I was younger, back when I still had cable, I did remember watching Hellraiser Bloodlines. Or like one of the new Cenobites they create and that they use in that one is the twins.
Yeah.
Like, he promises that he wouldn't separate them. And you actually see them like come apart and then come together, like, with someone stuck between them that they just assimilate into their collective.
Yeah, I love that scene. I can smell your fear. It is weeping from your every pore. Please, please don't separate me from my brother. I give you my word, gentlemen. That will never happen.
Yeah, now that was an interesting Cenobite. But and like I don't like that they tried to bring about like the origin of the lament configuration. I prefer stuff like that is just like left up to be like
ambiguous.
Yeah, like they show the guy making it, and it turns out like the toy maker's like what was it? His own daughter is like hollowed out and then like used as like to make like a.
Oh no, that was Angelique was just a whore.
Oh, she didn't have any ties to like the toy maker.
Nope.
I must remember that wrong then.
But no, he goes to deliver the box, and his pregnant wife is trying to convince him to at least wait until a later date. And if he had listened, he wouldn't have witnessed the murder. He could have just gotten his money and lived a happy life. But because he witnessed this demonic ritual, he tried to do something about it. And one of the wizards, he basically says, your bloodline's damned because of your little toy box.
Of course, so no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
He's like, I was just doing my job, and now the rest of your family will pay for all of eternity because you were doing your job. That's what you get for being a productive member of society.
Yeah. Now, the last two Hellraisers, they weren't able to get Doug Bradley. And I've heard a lot of people complain about this, but honestly, Pinhead is one of those characters I think you could actually get somebody besides Doug Bradley.
No, they've done 10 of them. If 8 of them had Doug Bradley and the other 2 don't, I don't really see that as a cardinal sin. Because 10 is a lot. That is a lot. That is a big number. It's like, how many Nightmare on Elm Streets did
Robert Englund do?
Yeah, Robert Englund do.
He did 8 with Freddy vs. Jason.
Well, there you go. He's also done 8 as well. It seems 8 is the magic number.
Yeah, and Doug Bradley himself, he said he's not opposed to doing it again, but it has to be the right script. And honestly, I don't think Hellraiser's going to get much more than a bargain basement budget at this point. So if he's gonna,
unless they do like a massive reboot and like they throw everything they can behind it.
There has been talk about Clive Barker doing a reboot, and I know Doug Bradley basically says he's on for that. But any of these straight-to-video ones, I don't think Doug's interested in it anymore, and so we're going to have to settle for somebody besides Bradley.
Now, Pinhead is a character you do see his face.
Yes.
I mean, he's under a shitload of makeup, but his face is there. He has a distinguishable face.
Yeah, well, in these last two Revelations, yeah, you could clearly tell it wasn't Doug Bradley. The makeup looked bad. But overall, that film had a lot of flaws.
I mean, if it was on a shoestring budget, like, you're not going to make him look exactly like Doug Bradley anyway.
Yeah, but this new one, Judgment, he looks pretty close. He does look pretty close. The actual leather costume is completely different. It's actually got like some fur sleeves on it. And it doesn't show as much of his viscera as the previous one. but I think it looks good.
Now, if they do a reboot, one thing I want them to do is to adhere more to the story.
Yeah,
Like, you know, if
be
you're,
closer to the Hellbound Heart.
because like I actually prefer the idea. Don't make the Cenobites demons. Do not bring in hell whatsoever. Because if you read the book, and some parts of the original movie suggest that they're not summoning them from hell. They're not coming from hell. They have no affiliation with hell. They just come from other places. What other places? Do you really want to fucking know the answer to that question?
Well, it's, the cube opens doors. That's what they tell you. Initially, they don't initially make it a gateway to hell. That comes from later lore.
Well, that comes from the second movie. In the
Yeah.
second movie, they just straight up say, "Oh, they're from hell."
Well, kind of. The Cenobites and not Angelique, Julie, they refer to the place as the labyrinth, not hell. So.
Well, no, they said like like I got sent to hell when I died, and this is where I ended up.
Well, that's what Frank said.
Yeah.
I can imagine this is what you would associate with hell, but
Maybe.
But yeah, Julia, she calls the place the labyrinth, and I don't recall the Cenobites ever referring to it as hell.
I just remember like there was a lot of overtones of like it being hell and them being like demons of hell in the second movie.
Yeah.
But that aside, it's like yeah, it's like you know what you want to go about like how they like gender swapping characters in the book. Pinhead was generally described as feminine.
Yeah, he had the voice of a woman. I don't know if they actually described his body as female. I think they said you couldn't tell, but he had the voice of a woman.
Like yeah, like go with that. You can recast Pinhead as a woman, and you can go back with like the other Cenobites, like really fucking do them up good with like a big modern budget.
Yeah.
And like modern special effects, modern.
Yeah, just make them all as androgynous as possible.
Yeah, but just make them. Because when I think of Cenobite, I just think of like a pain homunculus.
Yeah.
Is like because the way they describe it in the book, they don't see the difference. To them, it's all about sensory. If you've ever heard anything about Warhammer 40,000, they are pure fucking demons of Slaanesh. Or Slaanesh, or however you pronounce it. They're just, everything is a sensation. Doesn't matter if it's pleasure, doesn't matter if it's pain. Sensation is what they want, sensation is what they give.
Yeah.
To a normal human, it would be perceived as pain, but that's just because human flesh is so weak and pitiful compared to that. It's like, oh, your human minds are so weak and soft. They can't perceive pleasure like we can. Oh, what pleasures we will show you. That's straight up the kind of shit that like a demon of Slaanesh would say to you right before it turned you inside out and turned you into a fucking meat muppet.
Yeah. And then, like in the book, when Frank first encounters the Cenobites, essentially what happens is the senses start to get intermixed. Like he can start to hear colors and, taste sound and things like that. And he essentially goes through a sensory overload and starts begging them to make it stop. And they're like, nah.
It's like, no, if you wanted us to stop, you wouldn't have called us here. But like that was the whole point. Like, he had indulged in all the pleasures of the flesh and they no longer thrilled him.
Yeah.
So he had to, like, well, I need something beyond it. And I heard that this can give it to me. He's like, oh boy, you really should have thought that through more.
Yeah. You sure you can't find some more cocaine?
Try heroin. That tends to be like, the beginning and the end for a lot of people in addictions.
Yeah.
You know what they say about heroin? Once you start, you can't stop.
Never.
Until you die.
Yeah. So no, you're not going to try heroin, huh? You're just going to immediately jump to super heroin. All right.
Man, make you wish you could go to like the dull, like pleasureless sensations of heroin.
I just want oatmeal back.
But yeah, like he greatly regretted that. I love the way he described the engineer. The engineer is some sort of God, how do they describe it? Not as really as a person. It's some sort of creature, an entity that is always inventing new ways to torment and titillate the senses of everyone on this other side. It's essentially just this force that is always coming up with new ways to pleasure and torture these creatures at the same time, ripping apart his flesh and then reconstructing it just to tear it apart again. in a completely new way. And he never runs out of new ideas on how to fuck with you.
Yeah.
That's a scary ass thought. It's like you could be there for 1,000,000 years and you will never suffer the same extremes twice.
Yeah. That's pretty jarring.
Yeah, so not so much. I wouldn't really so much go for a sequel. I'd say go with a reboot and like keep close to the source material.
Yeah. Well, and also like the comics, there's plenty of stories they can still tell, and if they do a reboot, they can take some of those stories from the comics. And one of the great things I think about the comics is Pinhead's not always a character. I think they should do a Hellraiser film without Pinhead, period. Not even as like a background character, just to show like how far this lore can go. They don't have to be dependent on the Order of Gash. There are so many orders in hell.
Well, that's if you want to go with the whole hell route.
Yeah.
I'd say like since H.P. Lovecraft was so open with his like lore and was never concerned about people taking from it, his shit's pretty much public domain nowadays.
Yeah.
I'd say fucking make it that it's a dimension beyond the veil, like beyond the spheres. Like tie it in with fucking Lovecraft. Maybe the engineer is just a spawn.
One of the mad gods.
Yeah, like a spawn for one of the mad gods. Maybe he's a type of like priest to the mad gods, like Cthulhu is. A lot of people think that Cthulhu is a god himself. He's just a fucking priest from the outer circles.
Yep.
It's like that's just how fucking pathetic and like pitiful humans are in the grand scheme of things. That something we would consider a god is merely a worshiper of the real gods.
Yeah. It's a series that I think, if done right director, right script, you could really take Hellraiser far.
I mean, like, there really is no limit to it. But anyway, let's move on. What's the next one?
Next one is Candyman.
Candyman. I saw the first one a long time ago, and don't really remember a whole lot about it.
Candyman, basically, he's a ghost, and his existence depends on belief. In the first film, they end up associating murders with somebody else, and so he starts to lose his power. And the second film, his lover's mirror is destroyed, and that manages to banish him. And the third film, his paintings are destroyed, and the murders tied to him actually end up getting pinned on somebody else, and that kills more of his legend. I think they've explored his background as much as they need to in the movies.
Well, like, what did they go into his background? Was it the first or the second movie?
The second movie got most of it. The first film, they just kind of mention it. But the second film, you actually get to see, like, when he gets killed, he gets his hand cut off and covered in bees and crucified and all that fun stuff.
It's like, yeah, like, I believe it was that he was a... Was he just a black guy, or was he a black slave?
He was a painter, and he was hired by a Confederate to paint his daughter, and the two of them ended up falling in love.
And that was, yeah.
And that was at a time where...
No. It's like, man, tech is like the shit back in those days, especially along the South. Now, we live in Texas. We live in very South Texas. But we sure as fuck don't live in the South.
Yeah.
And I mean the South, not with a TH, but with an F. The South. I know for a fact I do not linger in the South. I do not fuck around in the South. I've been to Disney World twice in my life, and both times I drove. And me and my family knew goddamn well that we were scarce in the South. Once you hit East Texas, you do not stop unless you fucking have to. Because, there's some places there that really truly haven't modernized.
Yeah. There are some places that don't realize they lost the war.
And people go like, oh, that's just ignorant. It's like, you don't know. It's like, well, guess what? I'm not going to fucking stick around to find out.
No, I can say for a fact. I have some family in Indiana, and there are places in Indiana that still have the whites only signs. So There are some places that haven't caught up, unfortunately.
It's like, yeah. And even though I don't look at it as a minority myself, I sure as fuck ain't gonna press my luck going through there. I'll tell you that shit right now. But yeah, it's like you talk about like, oh, that was during a time where like that didn't fly. You could have done that in the '60s and you would have gotten killed for that shit back then.
Yeah.
You kidding me?
Yeah.
It's like that was not okay for a very long time. They did not get their act together for a while. And like you just said, there are still some places where they have yet to get their act together. But before we go turning this into a political podcast,
Yeah.
but yeah, just like to give you an idea of, like, yes, it's just like it's like, oh, it's just a story. It's like I can fucking imagine that shit happening back in like especially around the Civil War days.
Oh yeah.
Like when you really want to say like tensions were bad before. Now people are just armed. There's armies about. Yeah, I might have seen part of the second one. I might have caught that on HBO or Showtime back in the day. I remember something like, was it the first one or the second one? Like a woman gets raped in a bathroom in the inner city, and like they got all these guys, and she remembers one of them saying, "I'm the Candyman bitch," like before he raped her.
She didn't get raped, but she was like going through this bathroom, and this guy says, "I hear you're looking for Candyman, bitch," and he knocks her out with a hook.
And like they're doing the lineup, and like they make all these gang members like say that until she hears the right one.
Yeah.
I thought I remember them playing it up like she had been raped or something, but maybe it was just too much ambiguous cinematography. I hate that shit.
Yeah.
Like when they do or don't tell you, it's like what exactly happened. We just have to like leave it up to the imagination. It's like, well, sometimes that hurts the story and the plot.
Yeah. As we've seen with many Kubrick films.
But yeah, I don't really see a point to them doing another Candyman movie unless they want to
Well, there has been talk about doing a fourth one, and as far as I know, the project got canceled. But yeah, I think it may have one movie left in it to give them a proper send off rather than the way Part 3 ended, if only for that.
Well, I mean, you can because Tony Todd's still kicking around.
Yeah.
And he can probably do the work. The last thing I saw him or heard him in, he was in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 or something like that.
Last I saw him was in the Final Destination franchise, but yeah, he's still around. He does a lot of cameos for horror movies.
Well, as long as the man still gets work, he's a decent actor. God, I loved him in that remake of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
He was so fucking awesome in that.
Yeah, but yeah, Candyman, I think it's got potential for one movie left, and that being the close-off movie.
Yeah, like send it off, and then if they want to do a reboot after that with a different actor, then so be it.
Yeah.
But something just to like to close it off. This is the last Candyman film, like of the original series.
Yeah.
All right, so what's next?
Wishmaster.
The only thing I remember from that one was the end of the first one, which I believe it was the first one, which had an interesting way of defeating the bad guy. Was that the first one?
Where she wishes
the guy wasn't drunk when
Yeah, that's the first one.
It's like, no, I've been defeated by causality.
The second one's my favorite of that series, and the third and fourth film, they actually use a different gen. So, obviously, they could do as many sequels as they want, just fire up a new gen if they need to.
So it's always a genie, or a djinn, or whatever the hell they want to call it?
Yeah.
Do they distinguish the difference between a genie and a djinn?
They occasionally bring up genies, and usually you'll have the person say genies are not, what you think they are. Basically implying that, we've made fantasies about these evil creatures.
Well, I do know that Disney actually, way back in the day, back in Walt Disney Presents, they did one of their episodes based on science, or one of their Futureland segments, I believe they used to call it, where they talked about radioactive materials and how radioactive materials are going to be the future of mankind. And while a lot of the examples they gave were just bullshit that had no like actual application, but the interesting thing is that they use radiation. The analogy they used for it is the original story of the jinn, of the genie, which because the original telling of the genie was of someone who is fooled into releasing a jinn, or in this case, just a very powerful demon entity that was trapped in the bottle by a wise wizard. And he releases him. He's like, "Ha, you fool! I shall kill you." And before he gets the chance to like fucking unmake this dude with magic, he just shoves the cork back into the bottle, and it's like the jinn just
forced in.
Yeah, it's like apparently just like stuffing the cork in it is like, because his lower half was still in it, like you just see him get fucking vacuumed back into the bottle, and then the bottle starts banging, and he's like, "Hey, let me out! I'm sorry about all that. I'm gonna kill you stuff. I promise I won't do that this time." And the guy's like, "No, fuck you." He's like, "Come on, I'll give you 3 wishes. Come on, you want 3 wishes, don't you?" Like that was the original story. It was like, a guy opens a bottle with a genie in it. The genie's about to murder his ass dead. He closes up the bottle, retrapping the genie. The genie gets desperate. He's like, "All right, I want out of this fucking bottle. I'm sick of this nonsense. I already threatened to kill this guy. If I want him to open it again, I can't just say, I'm not going to kill you, honest."
Yeah.
It's like, "I'll give you 3 wishes." And so the guy lets him out. Now, it doesn't say how the end of that story is, if he ends up killing him afterwards or not. But essentially, like, that was the origin of the story. It wasn't like, Disney's Aladdin with like Robin Williams singing and dancing with done up like a Smurf.
Yeah. This is a movie that I kind of have mixed opinions on. In the 4th film, they introduced the concept of the hunter, which is essentially an angel that is supposed to kill the waker. The waker's the one that finds the genie and starts making the wishes. The purpose.
Oh yes, because like dealing with that djinn that wants to murder the shit out of you at the end of it isn't bad enough.
Yeah, the hunter is essentially sent down to kill you before you can make the 3rd wish, so that way humanity is still safe.
So what's the idea? Just like, once you give your 3rd wish, this genie becomes free and will destroy all of humanity?
At that point, the jinn can release the rest of the jinn upon the world.
Since he's out of his bottle, he just immediately seeks out all the other objects that jinn are trapped in and opens them up.
Well, no, essentially, like whatever veil of magic is holding them back, once that 3rd wish is made, they can separate the boundary between the worlds. The second one, they imply that the genie has to collect 100 souls before he can give the waker the 3 wishes, which is not something they deal with in any other movie.
It's just like ancillary rule bullshit.
Yeah. But I think there is potential for another movie. I just not sure where they could take it. About the most original idea I could come up with is maybe doing a female genie, but if she has a male waker, those 3 wishes will be up in no time. So,
will you do oral? Will you do anal?
will you do them both again? Yeah, it's
yeah, good point.
So, all right, should have had more females.
The first wish would be like, can you look really hot? Second wish is, will you let me fuck you? And the third wish is gonna be, can we do butt stuff?
Yeah. Sure, I've got 10 minutes. And in record time, the world is destroyed in 1 hour. For the butt stuff.
Hey man, depending on how good that butt stuff is, it might be worth it.
Well, it's going to be the last thing you experience, so...
He's like, fuck everything else, I got mine, what about... I don't care about yours. So where do you think they can go with that? I mean, like you said, they could really go anywhere with it, but that is like, Wishmaster is not another one of those movies that like you see, like, people rush to the theaters to go see.
Yeah, if they do another sequel, it's going to be a direct-to-video. Obviously, it's probably going to have a shit budget.
Now, the thing is, if they're going to do a sequel to a movie or a reboot of a movie, I don't really consider a direct to DVD to be a true sequel.
Yeah.
It's like, for me, a sequel, it's got to be in the theaters. It's got to be. If it's exclusive to Netflix, that don't fucking count.
Yeah.
So if you tell me we can do a sequel to this movie, but it's going to be a direct to video, then to me that tells me, well, then this franchise it has nowhere to go. It's done.
Yeah. Or at the very least, the studio doesn't have confidence in it.
It's like, unless that last direct to video is going to be like a death nail in that franchise's coffin, we're going to end it with this one so we can put like a bookend to this fucking series. That's the only excuse I would see for that.
Yeah.
Damn, I should have said this in the beginning. Like, this needs to be the rule for sequels. Shit. Yeah, well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that would be. So yeah, do you think that they could do a reboot or a sequel that would be able to get them in theaters?
For Wishmaster, I don't believe they could.
Then it would either have to be a closing it up, or that would be it.
Yeah.
All right, what's the next one?
Child's Play.
Well, you said I haven't seen the most recent one. I haven't. The only one I saw up to 3. I did not like 3 all that much.
3 was kind of a weak entry.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible. It didn't do anything for me. It was a straight 5 out of 10. Bleh. A meh for me. That's what it was.
Yeah,
and I did not like the look of any of the other ones. The Bride of Chucky, the Seed of Chucky. Yeah. None of those looked like they were worth my time. So to be honest, I didn't watch any of them.
Bride was fun. Seed was kind of weak. And it is kind of unfortunate that it was for the last theatrical releases of the Child's Play series, because it makes it look like they didn't care about the series anymore. Even if you haven't seen the movies, it just looks like they were lampooning it at that point.
Now, the first 2 movies I fucking love. Like, the first movie is great. In terms of, like, horror standpoints, the idea of him using voodoo to transfer soul into a doll is a little hokey, but I can't really see you explaining it any other way.
Yeah.
I mean, like, can you? I mean, like, voodoo magic, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. And, so the 3 middle entries, they are kind of the weaker end of the series, but I think they got their shit together with Curse and Cult.
Now, you said you really liked Cult of Chucky.
Yeah, I think Cult was good because it brings in the new characters that were introduced from Curse.
Well, all right, run me through. What's the storyline of the Curse of Chucky?
Curse of Chucky, you find out that, well, it starts off with this woman in a wheelchair living in her house. She has some family coming to visit that are trying to convince her to sell the house and go into a home.
Yeah, because that's obviously for her benefit.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to put you in a home by yourself or we'll never go visit you, but it's good for you.
Yeah, and she ends up getting a package that has the Chucky doll in there. And she doesn't have any idea why she got it, but there's a little girl that came with the family, so she lets her play with the doll. And of course, it doesn't take long for Chucky to start getting up to his old habits of killing people.
Did they explain, like, how he got there?
Yes, as it turns out, he had raped one of the original characters from the first movie, and she was pregnant with his daughter. And she had tried to escape, and he stabbed her, and police were like showing up at his house. So he stabs her, and then he runs off, and it actually leads into the first movie from there.
Oh, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah. And he's actually showing up at this house to kill her because he hasn't essentially finished the job with that family. And she ends up fighting him off, but she ends up in an insane asylum, which is where Cult of Chucky starts. And Andy ends up showing up in the middle of the movie to try to help her get away from Chucky. So
how do you get the Cult of Chucky? Is it just people that heard about the doll?
Actually, he's learned how to possess multiple bodies at once, and
really?
So he considers like all these dolls he is to be the cult. Yeah, he's there's a scene where three of the Chuckies are like arguing with each other about killing Andy, and the first guy's like, "Well, I'm off to kill Andy." He's like, "Hey, you got to suck titty today. I didn't get no titty, and look what happened to my hand." And the third one's like, "Well, hey, look what happened to my hair," and his head's like almost completely shaved. Like, oh shit, man, yeah, go fucking kill him, yeah.
So like it's all like they're all the original Chucky, but it's just like, are they like pieces of his soul, or are they all like just duplicates?
They haven't explained that part yet, and
because if they're like variations of, if they're just pieces of his soul, that means they could each be like variations of his personality,
yeah,
which would give them more distinguishing characteristics. Now, if they're all just duplications, it would be like being trapped forever with yourself, and I would imagine that they would, after a while, they would start turning on each other.
Yeah, now the Colt, the dolls do seem more vulnerable, so I think what's happening is he's like dividing his soul amongst the dolls, and so.
Well, the thing is, I don't really remember, like in the first two movies, it seemed that his durability came from the fact that he's a doll.
Yeah.
It's like you can take a doll apart, but those things were pretty sturdy. They had a, like, what was it, a solid aluminum body.
Yeah,
that held all the electronics. Their limbs were hard plastic.
Yeah, the core body, it was like a hard rubber. So all in all, yeah, it's a pretty resilient piece of hardware.
Well, the movies were set in the '80s, and back then, a lot of the toys that you could get from the store, you could bludgeon someone to death with that shit.
Yeah, because they were made to last.
They knew kids were rough with toys. They wanted their toys to last longer.
Yeah.
So they made a toy that you could like if a puma came at you, you could kill it. This mountain lion came after me, but I bludgeoned him to death with my Soundwave action figure. Because it's all fucking solid die-cast metal. He won't be transforming into no boombox, but that fucking mountain lion's dead as fuck.
Yeah. Which makes him cooler. Did your Soundwave kill a mountain lion? No.
Your Soundwave is bullshit. Mine's got battle scars, real ones.
The laser beak's gonna be in there forever.
Goddamn right, he earned it. Rumble and Frenzy gotta wait out in the cold now, not with Buzzsaw. But, so how did they end Cult of Chucky? Did they leave it kind of open-ended or what?
He ends up possessing the girl that he was trying to kill, and her and I forget her name, but the girl from Bride of Chucky ends up driving her off from the asylum. So Andy's still alive.
That kid is fucking resilient. I'm sure he's an adult now. I mean, he was he was in military school and 3.
Yeah.
He'd be a full-grown ass man now.
Yeah, he is.
Is it the same actor?
Yes.
Wow. That's phantasm levels of fucking commitment from the actors.
Yeah, and I hear that they're planning on including his mom in the next sequel, because apparently she got stuffed in an asylum as well.
Yeah, I do remember them saying that, which is why he was with a foster family in the second one.
Yeah. But yeah, this is actually a series I think that can go at least 2-3 more movies, depending on how much they try to rush plot.
But if they're going to do that, they need to bring it back to theater. Like I said, if they can't put it in theater, then it's not really worth continuing.
Yeah. I've even heard that they're considering doing a TV show of this. And
I heard rumors on YouTube online that they were thinking about rebooting the series.
I don't think they need to reboot it, but they could.
Well, there's a lot of things that didn't need to be fucking rebooted that they rebooted anyway.
Yeah.
It's I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. It's well, that one shouldn't be rebooted because blah, blah, blah. Because, well, I could. In fact, that's probably going to be a later episode.
What should and shouldn't be.
But, you want to... did we already talk about that?
Well, I know we talked about movies we wanted to see rebooted, like Robot Jocks and Last Dragon. But
yeah. But, fuck it. You know what? For those of you listening, if we're going to be coming back to topics over time, we'll come up with some new stuff to talk about them and stuff like that. It's this list, we may come back to it again. We probably will.
Yeah.
As we come up with more ideas, like shit, I should have done this, or shit, we should have talked about that,
Or, you know, like, hey, if some of these series do get sequels, we can, you know,
yeah.
reanalyze how that came
It's
out.
like, yeah, like talking about Phantasm, I had forgotten that shit that about like the second one with the blowtorch and stuff,
Yeah.
and then we got to see the last one. But speaking of sequels, though, something that we talked about before. This isn't part. Well, what's the last one? Was the Child's Play the last one on your list?
No, there's one more, but
Well, real quick, talking about sequels, we talked about The Shining on the last recording that we did. There is word going around that they are going to be doing a sequel to that based on the sequel to the book, which Stephen King did, I think it was like 2016 or 2017, called Doctor Sleep,
yeah.
which is supposed to be a direct sequel to the original Shining. Now, it's probably going to be more of a direct sequel to the book, but they're talking. He's writing it, or he's planning on writing. No, he already wrote it. Fuck, what am I talking about? They're planning on making it into a movie. They're going into talks right now. Now, if it's going to be a made-for-TV miniseries movie, a Netflix original movie, because no one really watches TV anymore, or if they're going to be doing a full theatrical one, that's all going to be up, and we'll see how that goes.
I imagine it'll be a theatrical one just because of how successful its reboot was.
Yeah, I mean, like, we obviously had problems with it, but I enjoyed it for what it was worth.
Yeah, I'll eventually put it on my shelf once it hits the $5 bin.
But yeah, all right, what's the last one on your list before we run out of time?
Alright, last one on my list is a series I don't think you're familiar with, but it has a cult following, and it's up to 5 sequels, so I figure I'll bring it up anyway, and that's Sleepaway Camp.
Oh, you mentioned that one before, but no, I don't believe I've seen any of them. Because I've seen a lot of schlocky movies that I didn't get to catch from the beginning, so I don't know the titles of it. I've seen a lot of schlocky movies from when I was a kid that I don't remember the names to.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Sleepaway Camp, but I do remember there was this one movie where it was like a summer camp. Like there's these kids there, like teenager kids anyway.
Yeah.
And there's like this reporter shows up. She does a story, and she asks one of the kids for like some blow, and the kid gives her like Drano, and she ends up like snorting it, and like it eats through the back of her sinus cavity and like destroys her brain, and she drops dead. Was that from Sleepaway Camp?
If it was, it might have been part 4 of The Survivor, which is one I haven't seen.
This was like years ago. This was back when I still had cable. I was probably in high school at the time, so we're talking like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a death I remember from the other 3.
Like, it doesn't sound like, it's not like a horror movie death, but like, she's like, it's like, hey, can you hook me up with some blow? And then like the teenage girl's like, sure. And she goes into the cabinet and she gets some like Drano, and like she goes like, you really need to check your stuff before you use it. And like she takes the money, gives it to the reporter. The reporter goes off, drives off somewhere, immediately snorts it without checking it. And just like you just see blood coming out of her nose and out of her mouth, and then she just drops dead.
Yeah, well, part 2 and 3 were kind of hokey. The first one, it's actually a very visceral slasher film. The death scenes in it are surprisingly graphic. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, you find out that the main killer, Angela, is actually a boy. The final reveal scene, she's nude, holding her boyfriend's head, and they show her naked, and you can see that it's a guy. And they like show some clips from her childhood where basically she got adopted by this crazy mother who felt, okay, well, we already have a boy, so 2 won't do. I will call you Angela.
We're going to cut your junk off.
So you couldn't really reboot the franchise because the people who would actually want to see this, they already know the big shocker ending. And nowadays, with just the political minefield, I don't think too many people are going to be appealed to a transvestite killer. I don't really think you can do much of a sequel to it because the sequels weren't that great. And then they did a sort of sequel to it, Return to Sleepaway Camp, in recent years, and they weren't successful with that one. And I don't think there's anything left you can do with it. It's a It's a fun movie, but I think it's done.
All right, well, so much for that list. We'll come back to this topic again because this is actually a pretty good topic, and it led us into a lot of conversations.
Yeah, it won't always be about horror movies. Horror movies is my passion, but we'll talk about other stuff.
I mean, like, if you're a dude and you're on the internet, you've seen a horror movie somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, this ain't Ready Player One where, like, you know, some guy's like, man, I don't like scary movies. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's like, no, you've seen at least one. Yeah. You've seen one. I can almost guarantee it. If you've not seen one, then comment and then get off your ass and go see one. I don't care what it is. You want to start off soft, watch The Gate. That's a nice... I need to go back to that because I honestly remember that being... It was a long-ass time ago. I saw this shit when... Like, it was fresh out of the theater, like, right when it was on TV. And I remember it being marketed as a kid's horror movie. And watching it as an adult, that is not for kids. No, it's not. It's fucking not.
Also, House would be a good starter horror film.
I find that to be more of a comedy than anything else, to be honest. But yeah, I guess so. It's a very goofy horror movie that I cannot take seriously.
Well, I don't take it seriously either, but then I don't take anything except Hellraiser seriously.
I try to go into horror movies, like, you know, with the mindset, like, I want to see them try to scare me.
Yeah.
Very seldom do they ever. It's like, at most, I'll get, like, startled or I'll kind of jump out of my seat. But
at this point, for me with horror movies, they'll get me with jump scares occasionally. But what I like to find is disturbing themes, and I think some of the movies that did that really well were Babadook, It Follows, and Sinister. Not the sequel to Sinister, though. If you can avoid that one, just pretend it doesn't exist. Stick with the first one.
The first Sinister did have, like, a lot of the stuff in there was just downright unsettling.
Yeah.
And, like, what really made it for me was the music. The music in combination with it was deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
Especially, like, the music that plays during...
Sinister, I actually had to take a break from, just because that music, it synced up with my heartbeat. And
that might have been intentional.
Yeah, it was... I had to take a break.
The music in particular, like, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's mostly about home movies. The music that plays during the home movies labeled Family Barbecue,
oof,
which is, I think...
chilling.
Yeah, like, that one, like, it starts off as, like, some basic music, and then it just fucking goes, like, all, like, fucking funhouse crazy shit on you. And I think that one's called, if I remember correctly, that song was called The Silence Teaches You How to Sing, which is really not okay for, like, a name of a song. It's like, that's fucked up, man. You don't name your shit that unless you got issues. And then the music that plays during... Well, it's a more traditional horror music, but the music that plays during lawn care.
Yeah, that one's pretty good. The one that really got me, though, is, minor spoiler here, he's, like, going through his house and he can't see the ghost following him, and it's kind of like a drum beat that's going on, and, like, you can kind of hear some chanting. And that's where I was like, you know, hey wife, let's go to Walmart. I gotta take a break.
You know what? One of these things we're gonna have to talk about is music in movies and how that can really bring a scene up or down. That's got to be a topic we're gonna talk about at some time. But once again, if you're listening to this on iTunes, if you're listening to this on YouTube, whenever I figure out where the hell I'm gonna be posting these goddamn things when I get around to doing it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, or whatever the equivalent is of. And let us know what you think. Give us suggestions of shit you want us to talk about.
Tell us stuff you want us to stop talking about.
No more horror movies. Well, you can go fuck yourself. That's not going to stop us.
I will always talk about food and horror.
Horror food. What food scares you the most?
Onions.
I thought it was pickles.
No, I just hate pickles. They don't scare me.
I've heard a lot of people say that they hate things that they actually fear.
Yeah, I've known that with everybody I know that has chlorophobia. Oh, no, I'm not afraid of clowns. I just hate them. Here's a clown. Ah!
Get that the fuck away from me. It's like, oh, that doesn't seem like a hate reaction. That seems more like a fear reaction to me.
Yeah, pickles, I'll look straight in that fucking jar and go, fuck you, fucking pickles.
I thought you would just, like, pick it up and smash it against the ground.
No, if somebody wants to eat the pickles, I don't understand why, but hey, go for it.
So anyway, that's all the time we got for now. We're going on the hour and a half mark, so we're going to go ahead and cut it off now. You guys keep watching, keep listening, keep doing whatever. Your viewership makes us stronger and keeps us alive. No, we're not demons. I don't know how many times I got to explain that to people.
I thought it was the dialysis, not the fans that kept me alive.
See y'all next time.